Hi, everyone. Okay, so I think the structure is that I'll tell you a little bit about Buddy and what do we do and how we do. And I try to address basically a bit the three questions that then I'd like you to discuss in smaller groups, which is one is about the intervention and how did Buddy get to the intervention that we have today and how we thought that that's the right one for the target group we work with. The second area is around measuring impact and measuring progress and how we do that in Buddy and how that may be relevant for you. And the third one is touching just a little bit around our strategy around financial sustainability. And that's, again, maybe not such a sexy topic, but nevertheless, a very important one, I think, because just like we discussed that ending a relationship may not be great for the mentee, in a way, sustainability of the organization of the program, it's a bit like ending it all at a more macro level, right? So if our motto is do no harm first, then all of these aspects are important. Can you all please close your eyes for a moment? And I'll do the same, so I'm not looking at you. And just imagine the last time you had a difficult situation, maybe you were ill, maybe you had to make a decision, or maybe you just wanted to share something great that happened in your life. And now imagine your phone and just think about the number of contacts that you have in your phone and the number of people that you called in that situation that you first imagined or you could have called. And now imagine for a moment that you would barely have any of these contacts in your phone or that you wouldn't even have a phone. Okay, so you can open your eyes now. I'll just give you a quick poll. I haven't done this before, but launch poll. If you could please tell me how many people you think you can trust, rely on, and you would have been able to call in the situation I asked you to imagine. Okay, so almost all of you answered. I don't know if the answers show you when I put end polling, but basically 75% of you, well, we are not such a big group now, 6 people said you had between 2 to 5 people you could call, and 2 of you said between 5 and 10. And the reason I ask you to imagine this is because the reality of a lot of the kids and young people that we work with who are based in institutions, when they turn 18 or leave these institutions, often they don't even have one person they can call and rely on, or nobody who stands by their side who can help them with anything that's happening to them. And this kind of feeling that you may have had when I asked you to imagine is something that drives very deeply. It's a deep motivation for my brother and I when we started Buddy in 2006. Because we come from a family where, you know, not a wealthy family, but where we had love and care. And we felt that we had always someone who stood by our side. And we also have a network of friends and a lot of people around us that we could rely on. And imagining that these children, young people don't have that network and don't have these friends and family members, just how difficult it has to be for them to, you know, to succeed. So that's kind of just a bit of the background of why we do, in a way, what we do and work so hard day in, day out. I'll share now my slides with you. So what is the problem? Kids, for a range of reasons, end up in the care of the state. Now, number of them are placed in foster families, or they get adopted. But there's still quite large numbers of children. In Slovakia, it's 5,000. Worldwide, it's still hundreds of thousands of children who end up in the care of the institution. That's, as I mentioned, for a range of reasons. It could be anything from war, poverty, unemployment, mental health problems, or violence and abuse. The children's centers, which you may have heard of as either orphanages or under different names in different countries, children get accommodation, they get food, they get healthcare, they go to school, but they have care in groups. And as much as they're trying to reduce the number of children per carer, it's still not a healthy environment, right? So imagine you have children who are all day at school in a group setting, and then in the afternoon they come home, and again, they're in a group setting with all these other children. And there is a carer who is trying to care for the needs of children of different ages. So those of you who have children, you know how difficult for many it may be, and how time consuming it is to meet the needs of 1 or 2 children, not much higher numbers. And so over the years, we've learned, and this is something we felt right at the start in 2006, but somehow we just didn't have, I would say, the guts, the finances, and the courage to address the problem in a complex way over a longer term. But we immediately felt, okay, they need individual love, care, and attention, right? Now, we defined the problem, but we didn't have the solution at that time. We're like, well, how can you provide that? And of course, you're plugging into some system in a country that is set up in a particular way, right? And you cannot disrupt the system overnight. And also, if we say, well, they shouldn't be in institutions, you say, okay, but you have to set up a lot of other things to help them not be in institutions, or just move in and in out of the institutions, right? So over the many years, I'll go maybe first to history and then I come back here. And I didn't put in the history slide. Okay, so I'll just tell you about it. So we started in 2006. And so for 8 years, what we call this period of research and development, we were trying to figure out, okay, how can we best meet their individual needs and attention? You know, should we just raise funding for organizations that help place them in families, or what kind of complement can we be? And first we focus on all kinds of experiential learning, skill development, because, you know, we thought we have to help them integrate, to get on their own feet. You know, they need jobs, accommodation, they need hard skills. And we were learning and seeing that if there isn't a person by their side who can deal with any type of problem that they're having, it's extremely difficult for these children to integrate and become independent. So what's our solution? Well, first of all, we, over the years, defined very specifically the target age group. And we work with children 12 plus. There's several reasons. The younger ones are ideally adopted or placed into foster families. Also, it's very important for the children to understand that the role of the mentor, right? So you wouldn't want the children to attach in a way to these mentors that they would then think, oh, well, they'll adopt me or they'll take me with me, right? So the age, and the third reason was that these are children who we would say were completely at the tail of being left behind, because they don't go to foster families, they're not adopted. Often foster families return them because they struggle with their behavior, and their children also who no longer want to go to a foster family because it's just been too traumatic to move from family to family. Who is our volunteer? We don't quite use the language of mentor because we just felt that maybe describing more specifically of who the volunteer is rather than putting it under the umbrella of mentor serve better our purpose. So they are young, stable adults who commit to a minimum of 3 years, but ideally over many years of the child's life, all the way to their transition out of the children's center, and possibly lifetime in a different intensity. What do? Well, they spend regularly time with them on a weekly basis. How we do it, so as I've mentioned, we work with the state because the institutions are state-owned. So it took us a lot of years to develop the trust of these institutions, because there's many organizations who want to work, they say they want the best for the children. So we needed to show a consistent work, kind of a track record of what we do, how we do it, and how professional we are. So they allow us to access these children. And at the same time, dancing a very thin line of them not feeling criticized, because most carers in these places, they really mean the best and they try their best, but they're operating in a system which is suboptimal, right? So it doesn't, it's not their fault that the children are in these care homes. Then big part of our job is recruiting volunteers. The selection process we have is 3 to 6 months. There's 6-7 stages to it. And the reason is twofold, that our #1 priority is child protection and the safety, that we choose safe and stable volunteers. And it's also an opportunity for the volunteers to think whether they want to step back, right? Whether this is something that is truly meant for them, or maybe another type of volunteering initiative is meant for them, especially because we lay out the requirement that it's 3 years and ideally longer. And then they are trained and continuously supported by our team of psychologists, where every psychologist has 20 pairs. We focused a lot on measuring impact, and that's our body pyramid of impact measurement and quality improvement. So at the bottom you see safety, because basically choosing safe individuals is the first step. Then developing trust, because we work with traumatized children. This can be months or even over a year. Then it's the relationship. We use tools to monitor the quality of the relationship from the mentor and the mentee side. Then it's skill development. So that's, again, we use a tool from the UK, which is a licensed tool called the Outcome Star, which I'll talk about a bit later, which places the child at the center of meeting their needs. And so it's done together with the child or the young person, and we focus on the goals that are important to them. And ultimately, it's how successfully they are reaching independence, right? So that's accommodation, housing, accommodation, work, and basically ability to live independently. We're a value-based program. This is, again, something that we find very important, to lay out our values and lay out these values and translate them into our contract, into our ethical code of conduct, as well as when we present ourselves to donors, because we think that only if our team is value aligned, our volunteers and the donors, will they remain engaged and will they kind of have a full buy-in into the mission and the vision. So our value are around safety, because we all need to feel safe to be able to do anything. Then it's joy. So everything we do, try to do it with fun and joy. Then it's trust, because the whole program is based on trust as well. We need the trust of the donors. It's vice versa. Under wisdom, it's the professionality and being evidence-based. And finally, endurance, because this is not something that gets done overnight. What we think is unique about Buddy, and why we maybe refrained from using the word mentor, and someone said, oh yeah, call it buddying, because it's that depth and, you know, you building it on attachment theory that. But I don't know, I mean, we have a lot of debates about calling it a mentoring program or not. Usually our team, and maybe it's also culture specific in our language, it's a bit of a dry word. So the team reacted, well, no, let's stay to volunteer and stick to volunteer, and then explain who our volunteer is. So Buddy is, as I mentioned to you, it's first about the relationship, and I think it's about the in-depth understanding of our target group. So these are children and young people who had what now they also call adverse childhood events or severe traumas, and not one but multiple traumas, which they may have experienced their own families, but also by being taken out of their families and so on. So Everything in the program, everything we do is based on attachment theory, where we think that by children building trusting relationships, they're learning to trust adults again. And that's something they lost because of their history, right? So if you're unable to trust the people who are closest to you, which should be your parents, then your ability to trust your employer, your colleagues, or any type of institution, and anyone telling you what you should or shouldn't do later on, makes it very difficult to function and also form healthy relationships if you'd like to form a family or then with your children. So it becomes a vicious circle. Once this trusting relationship is formed and volunteers accept children as they are, and children accept volunteers, they can begin to listen to them, right? They can begin to work with them. And here we had, again, many years of debates in our organization about what is most important for these children. Is it motivation? Is it self-confidence? Is it getting them a job? Is it that their teeth are falling out? Is it that they're, taking drugs? What is it? And of course, depending on who we hired, everyone had a bit of a different view, right? And then I found this tool in the UK, which came out of the sector with working with homeless people, which is called, this outcome star, which said, well, it's all important, right? and we have to ask the person what's important at any point to them, what's most important, right? I can see, oh, this is the most important thing for my daughter, but if she thinks differently, a change will only happen when she will realize that, okay, yes, I think I want to change this as well. So this tool is based on something that's called a journey of change. You see it in the bottom. It goes from stuck to accepting help, to trying to sort things out, to getting there with help, and to independence. And it's in the hands of the child and the young person, right? So you don't progress across all areas. You choose the area, you first map your life, and then you work on the area you care about the most, or maybe where you have the biggest problem, or maybe where you want to change something. So we had, say, a boy who said, I want to not get into fights with my friends, okay? So they're basically working on anger management. We have someone else who says, I want to work on the relationship with my biological mother who is in jail, right? And the reason it's important for us to work with the star is because before we did that, we may have helped our young people to get a job and accommodation, but suddenly they lost the job or they didn't turn up. And that was because they had a drug problem or an addiction problem. So using the star, it helps lay out how the child is doing across these different areas of their life, how it's all interlinked, right? And also for the volunteers to, once they go through that relationship forming stage, they need a bit more support as to where to go with the child, right? And the star just helps to understand what the child's needs are at any point. Okay, so impact, I've mentioned to you, so we look at impact and benefit across many levels. So first is whether they're gaining a person of trust and whether the relationship is a good quality relationship. So we look at it from the child and the volunteer's perspective. An independent evaluation found that the program is creating and maintaining strong relationships and that the children are feeling happy. And this is the basic point to enable then the child's development. 97% of the children are saying they can always rely on their volunteer. 95% are saying that the volunteer is making them happy. So-called hard impact is we monitor our children, or I would say young people, once they leave the institution, okay? And the state only looks at them, and the data from the state is only 1 or 2 years after they left. What we do is try to look at their journey months or years, as long as we can, after they left the institution. And we're finding that most of them, and so far, and I'm sure this will change as our sample grows, have accommodation and have some type of a job. Of course, there's also a quality differential in the job, okay? So you can have a temporary job or you can have a proper longer term job. We look at impact for volunteers because of course we know there's a huge benefit to the volunteers. It's not our primary objective, but if we're already selecting volunteers who are patient, empathetic, and responsible, from our surveys, we're seeing that, you know, they're saying, oof, I've become even more patient. You know, my view on life has changed even further. So it's incredible to see that, yes, we already have the, if I could say, the cream of the cream in terms of people who want to give back long term, and still it manages to bring them benefit. We're also asking and continuously in contact with our donors, and we want to make sure that they know what we're doing and what it's bringing to them. We also ask feedback from the centers, because it's important that they view us as partners and that it's not a competition on who's done more for the child. And finally, I think where in terms of the sustainability, our strategy is, so currently on this map, you see in the left corner, we're operating in 4 regions in Slovakia. Next year, we'd like to go to the east of the country. And at the same time, we're preparing a franchising manual, because there was been interest internationally to take Buddy abroad. And we're debating as to how to best do that, how to best define what is unique and specific to Buddy. But if someone, say, wanted to take it and start it somewhere else, a partner organization, we would say, okay, these are the core defining principles that you have to stick to, and the rest, you know, you adapt it to your country context. Our strategy in terms of finances is to look for recurrent donors, so regular long-term commitments rather than one-time support, because it's important for us that the donors understand that with a one-time check, they will not solve the problem. It doesn't allow a sustainable intervention for those who need it the most. So I think that's it. And kind of our claim is that everybody needs somebody. So we really strongly believe that we cannot do this alone. And the more we can enlarge our networks and find these stable individuals to those who need it most, the better the better off they'll be. So that's from my end. Thank you for your attention. So if you don't have any more questions, I realized the other thing I wanted to tell you, which I didn't, was that we started now a quasi-experimental evaluation of the program in partnership with, I don't know how many of you are researchers, with a university in the United States, where we're planning to compare children in the Buddy program with children outside the Buddy program on a set of social and emotional, I can show you actually the slide here. Okay. Can you see it? Yeah. So it's on a, basically the areas we want to focus on assessing are the ones that we found through our internal evaluation that's where we see benefit. So it's social support, it's loneliness, it's interpersonal trust, emotional functioning, particularly emotional regulation being one of the most important areas that we find that is important to work on with children who experience severe trauma. Self-esteem, resilience, conduct problems, peer relationship, education outcomes as well, even though our team is extremely hesitant to focus on education outcomes, because with children who have severe traumas, looking at grades they find it a very bad idea, because most of these children struggle at school and are inappropriately supported at the school. So any type of improvement is not likely to reflect on grades. And finally, self-perceived quality of life. So hopefully in a few years' time, if we meet again, hopefully in person at one of these conferences, we'll be able to share some of these results. Someone asked me, aren't you afraid? What if nothing shows up in this? Because of course, some of the, I think, benefits of mentoring can be tricky to pick up in these type of studies. But I said, you know what, I think we should still do it, because it's just different type of evidence, and all the evidence is important. So I think this was one thing that I didn't show you before. And yes, I can share this with you later in terms of some of the other slides. So I had 3 questions, but my experience from the Monday session was that it was too much for, and so one question is around the intervention itself. The other question is around, okay, let me see if you can see it. Okay, so one is, what approaches work, why, and how do you know? So this is along like, why do you do what you do, and why you think that's the right way to do it. The second one is measuring quality, impact, and doing research. So we've seen through our experience in a lot of organizations who, and including some of our team members who say, oh, let's do it because this seems like a good idea, this feels good, or they say it's nice, and that's kind of that feel good versus real good in terms of actually trying to see if you're achieving what you intend to achieve. And finally, it's about the finances and sustainability, right? So whether COVID has impacted you, you can focus on COVID, you can go more generally, and basically how you're going about making your intervention and your organization or the program sustainable. So as we like to say, buddy, is say, tomorrow I turn the lights off, or they turn the lights off, what happens, right? And so our strategy is always, well, if you turn some of the lights off, well, we get rid of this part of the team. You turn more lights off, we get rid of this part of the team. And if you turn all the lights off, well, the pairs that have been matched, they've been trained and supported so much that we strongly believe that those matches will continue and there will be no harm to the child. Yeah, I heard you speak about Balundu and Bifi. Quite interesting what you were discussing. I think one aspect that I noticed and I heard in another session in terms of working with traumatized children was this aspect of having a limit on the relationship, right? That you can manage the ending, and then also had the other argument immediately in terms of, well, but it can be quite short, and can you what can you achieve in something that may seem like a long period, but maybe it's not a long period after all, right? So you were comparing the 2 programs and thinking through in terms of what's most suited to your target group. And what's interesting, because we've also worked with this and we have quite a solid contract that the mentors have to sign and commit, where we lay out very clearly the expectations, and it's very important to communicate and match, the commitment, but also with your selection, training, and support process, right? So sometimes when we analyze our matches that were ended, and we know, well, they entered when maybe the contract wasn't so clear, right? Or the commitment wasn't so clear, or the selection and training and support. So when we now compare it to almost an adoption process, it's because we want a very deep long-term commitment, where of course there are situations where things can still go upside down in your life, and it's very important to then communicate that closure with all parties. But definitely we became maybe braver as we were clearer on what we want to achieve in terms of the type of volunteers and what kind of criteria they should meet to join the program. And that took us a long time, because we went from recruiting volunteers on the street, so to speak, to training them immediately at the start on attachment theory and social care system, and giving them a lot of in-depth training to then take home with them and digest whether this is something they want to get into. So that's just in terms of, I think when you hear a lot of these different wonderful programs at the conference, and they may all seem similar, but understanding in detail of what, the specifics of your country, your culture, your target group is very important to find the right complementary intervention. And maybe to close the loop, thank you very much on the things that you said. I think what is important to add is that it may feel like quite a task to begin to measure and to evaluate. And I think it's not possible for all the organization to get someone external, whether in terms of finances or because you don't have the, the human capacity when you're busy doing. But I think maybe the takeaway point here is that just start with something, like someone once said, well, a lot of stories add up to data, right? So I think it's important to define and have clarity around, what's your Northern Star, where are you trying to go, and begin to collect some type of information. And over the years, you can improve, you may get external evaluations, but yes, it's not possible to do it overnight, and I don't think that should be the objective, but the objective should be to begin to look at what you're doing and how you're doing, and how you're meeting your goals and objectives. So thank you so much. I think you touched on so many of the important points that we're now discussing, and Buddy as well. I think the question of government, depends if you're in Germany or Slovakia. We're in a country where we cannot much rely on government funding, but we're equally exploring venues such as, through social work, what are different aspects where this could come in. Definitely thinking about sustainability is putting your eggs not in one basket, but across many baskets. And one of the strategies that I experienced and discussed also in the UK is engaging your community. So that may be one tip for you in terms of, yes, the one-time support in grants is limiting, but engaging your local community, your local businesses and companies, and seeing that this is, this is benefit for all of you is something that we are finding as the effective way forward, because government normally takes long, and now in these times has become more unpredictable, but definitely putting the foot in there is useful, but linking into the local community where they feel the problems and they're part of the solution is very important. And finally, as you said, the brand, right? So you need to get out the brand there, and where it stops being about where they can identify themselves more broadly in the population with your vision, with your mission, with your mission, and why it's important to do what you do. So I know we're over time. I will wrap it up now, so you have at least 5 minutes to stretch your legs and get a coffee or run around the house, because I think they start at 4. Thank you very much for your great contributions. I hope it's been useful. I will, Tina has shared the link, but what I'll do is just put in some final thoughts in the conclusion. You have my email at the top. If you want to add yours, please feel free to do so we kind of know about each other, who was here from which organization, and thank you. And I hope to see another time, not in the hallway, so maybe individually we can reach out to each other. Thank you. I think that's maybe a point I addressed in the other session, which focused on volunteer recruitment, that over the years, because we became so clear about what type of volunteers we're searching for, we've also become very strict, I would say. Only about 5% go through. So when we compare to adoption process, we now have, up to October, so we had around 350 applications, and 5% will pass the selection. And that's mainly, what you're asking for is in those 3 to 6 months of selection, it's an opportunity for both sides to, appreciate and understand what they're getting into. It's to understand that it is a commitment for many years. We're very open, cards out on the table, and we ask the other side to be the same, right? So we look for people who, if they had challenges and issues in their lives or traumas, that, that's okay, but they have to be at a stage of life where they know how to cope with them if they're triggered by the child's trauma, right? So it doesn't become a problem. And at the same time, things like you've mentioned, so if we have a volunteer who seems great, but he or she says, oh, but I plan to, go and work abroad. Well, we tell them, why don't you you know, go and work abroad and then get back in touch with us when you return if you're still interested, because we've become quite aware of exactly this, right? We analyze the pairs that, you know, this also links back to measurement. We do in-depth analysis on the matches that didn't last and try to identify where the problem was, anywhere from, you know, selection, matching, care, or was it an unexpected event, truly one that you could, you know, that could happen to any of us and we can be unprepared for, or is the reason from the side of the center or even the child's side, right? There could be unexpected events in the child's life for which it could end. But it's exactly for this. So in the other session, we were also saying that it's very important to share the expectations from the volunteers very clearly from the start and the level of commitment. I think you touched on a number of points. Feel good and real good was basically aiming at a lot of organization may do things, well, it works, I think it works, it looks right, they say it's good. And real good is to actually try to look at the progress and see if, you know, you're meeting, you know, you're doing what you'd like to be doing, right? So I like to say, and I have worked on, you know, different projects and before I did this work, and that regardless of the resource you have, you know, try to put together stories or data in some form or another, you know, start somewhere. And I think, you know, you've mentioned stories, you've mentioned harder data. I mean, most of us are doing very difficult work with very difficult target groups. So no, it doesn't happen overnight. And no, you won't have massive numbers, but you have to, I think, start somewhere, and different donors or different stakeholders are interested in different aspects, right? Someone wants the child story. Someone wants to know, you know, what benefit this has for the volunteer. Someone wants to hear the story. Others want to see hard outcomes. So I think it's important that you begin to think about measurement and looking at impact and put it together. And I think you mentioned another important point is about using the stories with the donors. And as I've mentioned in Buddy, we have child protection on the first place. So we've also over the years, we are first of all not allowed to show pictures of the children. That's why a lot of what you see is graphics and through drawings. But at the same time, you know, now when we publish kind of general stories, you know, the story could be similar to many of the stories of our children, but it's under a different name. Or, you know, when the volunteers speak about the child story, they speak in general terms. So we always think also in PR and marketing and you know, when coming to donors, that these are real human beings and their life situation can change. So they see their photo up somewhere, smiling in a good stage, and then there can be a difficult stage. And that's the case in all our lives, right? It's not always up, up, up. So I think it's very important to think about protecting and the ethical aspect and the child protection aspect. Okay, I put that question up there mainly because I think we were going through phases, you know, as well. When all of this started, we made scenario 1, 2, 3, which basically involved, you know, kind of nothing, cuts, and then reducing the program for the essential staff to keep running what's the most important bit, right? To keep the support for the volunteers. And then scenario 4 would be, okay, well, we have to shut doors fully and the matches will continue because the volunteers are already have received a huge amount of training and support and are already very empowered and enabled to keep working with the children. So in terms of sustainability, to think sustainability of intervention and the organization and your staff. And I think, as you say, Elena, we've also been seeing, yes, some support has dropped off, mainly from the donor base that has, you know, say small, medium enterprises or those whose operations have been immediately affected, right? So if it's a company that, I don't know, sells flowers, obviously they have not been selling flowers and they withdrew their support. But we have had, on the other hand, some strengthening and some new donors, and the other ones kind of sticking and staying. So far, you know, it's not as bad as it could have been, but I think continued kind of strengthening of the donor base and diversification of the funds is extremely important, because we've had organizations through our other work turn to us who say have been heavily dependent on events, right? Funds from events or fundraisers, like physical fundraisers, and they're struggling because they lost a significant proportion of their budget. So I think maybe here the concluding point was more is to strengthen the different bases and think about, you know, the organizational and the program, as well as the financial sustainability and where you want to go and how that comes together with not just the intervention, but overall the support and how long you kind of want to be around. And I think probably you come from different sides to this, right? Like some of you may be more heavily dependent on grants and one-time donations versus others for kind of continuous support. So when we were thinking in our organization about sustainability, right? So you go from, you know, the top, you have the centers, you have the children, the volunteers, and you have the coordinators, and under them you have the support team, right? Where you have the ops, the finance, the marketing, the program manager. But when we think of, you know, even if we had to be cutting and closing, as you say, Lena, if this will come in a year or two, right? And we have to reduce, we're thinking about is, okay, what can we reduce in the organization to keep the core going, right? So that's kind of our mentality. So we've always thinking, okay, if tomorrow I take the electricity out of the plug, like we run out of juice, okay, how do we have to set this up in a way that we empower the volunteers as much as we can? So even if we had to cut off the paid staff, so to speak, they can keep on operating and providing the support for the children. Okay. Well, thank you very much. We went a bit over time. Thank you. Have a nice evening. Bye.
Thank you.